Yes, hello my friends and happy Friday. I hope your week is coming to a nice, beautiful close. We made it through another one, and it was a tough one, especially for our friends over there on the East Coast in Florida, Jeff and others. We do hope that you are hanging in there and doing well as the week wraps up, as Hurricane Ian scoots on through Florida. We know it's going up to the rest of the East Coast, and so we're praying for everybody else over there. We know there's a lot going on. But this morning, I was poking around on the interwebs, and old Pooty Poo is up to no good again. He's out there giving some speeches, and today it looked like he was in front of sort of like a State of the Union type of analog. You know, we have the big events where the president comes out in front of both houses of Congress, and they all sit there and they listen to him, and one side stands up and then sits down, and the other side stands up and then sits down, and it's like this stupid little thing that we do. But that's governance now, and we have a very similar thing happening there in Russia. I saw some video and some pictures, and it's always interesting to me to watch how other countries and other leaders sort of comport themselves. I was very interested. I actually was fortunate enough to go to China before things really got bad over there. And, you know, I went to Beijing, and I got to see, you know, the People's House and all of this stuff. And so when I watch these dictators and how they comport themselves, I think symbology and the way they structure their buildings and their, you know, sort of second tier leaders and all of this. Anyways, that's a big digression. But they were there. They had everybody filled in this big giant room, and Putin gave this speech. And he said some interesting things in there, and people are wondering what to take of it. Whether this is a sign of surrender, whether he's sort of wanting to wind this whole thing down, or whether this is a sign of escalation, because we've got some pretty interesting context here. We have the Nord Stream pipeline that, of course, was bombed or sabotaged, and we are seeing what feels like escalation to many people, sort of, you know, an increasing in tension in different sectors that we didn't have even just a month ago. So what's going on here? Well, he did sort of, and again, I'm always skeptical on these things because of translation, and I think that what I've experienced with some of these speeches is, you know, people sort of hear what they want to hear. Putin will say something and CNN will interpret it one way, and then Fox will interpret it a different way, or they're mostly the same now, but, you know, other people on the internet will interpret it differently. So I am curious about it, but the story goes that there is sort of an urging for a ceasefire. Putin says, okay, we've sort of had enough of this stuff. We've gotten what we've come to accomplish, and we want to hold on to these 4 regions that have really been the subject, you know, in the Donbass, the subject of the entire war, saying we're going to keep those. And if you remember, they had the recent votes, and I saw footage of that. And again, you know, it's war. There's propaganda from both sides. And there's propaganda from the Ukrainians, and I would say from Ukrainian sympathizers, right? You know, whatever you want to, however you want to label both sides of this conflict. But you've got, you know, sort of open propaganda from both sides. Everybody's acknowledging it. And there was even a Twitter account that I was following that was sort of engaging in it, in open propaganda. And all of the users were saying, well, it's okay, it's a time of war. Like, you have to do it, it's funny, just keep doing it, you know. So we sort of just are living in this new world where we have the authorities telling us they're battling misinformation, but I don't think so, right? I think they're actually creating it and shoving it down all of our gullets, which is something that they do. They like to tell you that they're not doing something while they're doing something. So we have a lot of questions about, you know, that vote and what was going on, but some of the videos on the vote were people going and voting in full, you know, military fatigues with like a mask on and goggles. Like, I'm here to vote. You're going, okay, who are you? And how many times have you come through here? And what's going on? You know, just looked very, very strange. But that is the pretext. That's what Putin is using. Should we say hi to the doggies today? Let's go say hi to the doggies. The the Russians are now using that as a pretext to say, look, we voted and the people have spoken. They have told us that they want to be part of Russia, and so we're going to go ahead and honor them. We're going to make a declaration that these 4 regions are now part of Russia, and everybody in there is now a Russian citizen. Welcome to Russia. Welcome to our country. Great job. And now, since we've had this whole thing resolved, right, since Putin has come out and said, okay, we've got what we wanted, more or less, we can enter into negotiations now that, mission accomplished. Should have done his speech on an aircraft carrier. But he's saying, okay, look, we're basically done. We're going to keep these 4 occupied regions. Now it's appropriate for a ceasefire. And we're willing to open discussions. And of course, that's going to be just a total non-starter for the West. Definitely will not be anything that I think Zelensky is going to be okay talking about. We'll see. I could be wrong about that. But I don't think so, because we had previously had conversations about negotiations and what that might take to resolve this whole conflict. And we had that clip from Jake Sullivan, if you remember. Jake Sullivan, very smart, from Oxford. He was on with Chuck Todd or somebody, and he was asked about diplomacy and about negotiations. And he said, well, yeah, of course. I mean, nobody wants war. We all want to solve this thing. But the question is about justice, is what he said. And Putin needs to be held accountable for his war crimes. And as we noted on the show, I get these rocks stuck in my shoes sometimes, and I have to get them out. Otherwise, it just makes that annoying little grating sound when you walk. But mission accomplished on that one. So, absolute non-starter for Putin to be prosecuted in the International Criminal Court by Jake Sullivan, saying, we're willing to negotiate, but we're keeping all of these little areas of land. Do you think he's willing to suddenly say, sure, I'll show up and be held accountable for all of these crimes? And as long as that is a demand from the West, as long as that's what, Zelensky or Jake Sullivan or the very intelligent people in all of these different agencies who are guiding us through this, if that's a non-negotiable term for them, then I don't really see how this thing, has an exit ramp. It's like in criminal court, in criminal law, we're always debating between settling a case called taking a plea deal or going to trial, for example. Most cases resolve in one of those 2 modalities. Oftentimes cases also get dismissed, but that's less likely, especially in certain jurisdictions. I mean, sort of voluntarily dismissed or dismissed on a technicality. So the point is, if you have a case and the case is progressing, and I'm a defense attorney, and I'm talking with a prosecutor, and we're saying, hey, let's negotiate this deal. The prosecutor comes to me and says, I've got an offer for you. We're going to send your guy to jail for 30 days. And my guy's like, we're definitely not going to jail at all, right? Okay, perfect. So we know that's a hard no. So we respond back and we say, we want 0 days, thank you. We also want the case dismissed on top of that. And because your officer's conduct was so egregious, we would like a little bit of an apology letter drafted in cursive on some sort of pretty paper, whatever you've got. And we want that sent over to us. And then we'll go ahead and resolve this case. Right? You send that over to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor's like, what? An apology letter? And they say, okay, well, now we're going to give you the death penalty because you just insulted us. And so it's like both sides are negotiating, but they're not really negotiating. Right? They're sort of insulting each other a little bit. It's kind of like, a little bit of a verbal backhand a little bit. So Putin says, okay, we're ready to negotiate with you now that we have stolen all of your land. Ukrainian goes, oh, thank you for your good faith negotiation. And Sullivan turns around and says, we'd love to negotiate. We'd love to have diplomacy as long as Putin gets the death penalty. Then we're fair game. So it's sort of both sides, playing that negotiation, that good faith argument, when everybody knows that's not what anybody means at all. And so that speech just came out, and I'm sure there's going to be just an absolute ton of reaction to that today. So we'll probably get into that. But you can imagine that the Ukrainians will respond. We'll probably hear from the White House. I don't know if KJP has a press briefing today or not. I didn't take a look at the schedule. But certainly that will be an issue. Now, there was another thing that popped up in this, and the speech, I think, was still sort of being digested as I was heading out the door this morning. But Putin's also talking about, this nuclear weapon issue, which is a pretty big issue that some people are sort of ignoring, I think, or just sort of writing off. And I think that's a little bit naive. I've watched several of Putin's speeches, and I don't speak Russian, but the translation seemed to be good, and he seemed to be pretty dang animated when he talks about, NATO expansion, and some of the things that are happening outside of Russia, right? Maybe on the Western side, as an existential threat to the country. I actually believe him on that. I think he really is legitimate on that, because that's sort of I don't mean that he's right, but I do believe he's sincere in his belief that he considers this to be an existential threat. And I sort of think about him as that Cold War era, protege. And so I think if he makes a warning like that, you have to consider it. But regardless, a lot of people have been writing it off. And he mentioned some of that in his speech. My understanding is that he said something like, the United States used nuclear weapons first. And in fact, they used it twice in Japan back in World War II, which is true. And so, but the point of his bringing that up is to say that that was precedent, and that should Russia decide that they have the same interest at stake, then they would be justified in using it as well. And, so that obviously is a scary thought. And it got me thinking, actually. I was wondering if a nuclear bomb did go off, if, Putin or some Russian satellite state, or, ex-Soviet Union satellite state, if there was something that did happen, would anybody claim responsibility for it at all? I mean, I'm sure that the intelligence communities could, it's not like nuclear bombs are lying around. It's like, I don't know what happened to that one. You'd sort of, I would guess, be able to source it, find that chain of custody, to use a legal term, figure out where it came from and who was responsible for it. But would anybody take credit for it? Or would everybody point their fingers at each other? Because we're still seeing that happening with Nord Stream, and of course that's on a different scale, but not really. I mean, yes, it's not a nuclear bomb, but you still need, according to what we were seeing, you really need a big entity to execute something like that. Again, it's not like you just have submarines and thousands of pounds of explosives and the technical capabilities to get to the bottom of the Baltic Sea. So again, it's not like you just like a group of guys are just like, hey, let's go blow up a pipeline today. That sounds good. So my point is, whether you're going to detonate a bomb or whether you're going to blow up a pipeline, you have some technical hurdles to overcome. And, we're all asking ourselves, who could be responsible for some of that? Is there any evidence one way or the other? And it doesn't look like anybody's taking responsibility for Nord Stream. And I believe Putin saying that, it's not us. So the United States is investigating it. And the United States has made several interesting comments about wanting the pipeline eliminated, removed, and now it's taken out. So we'll see where that story develops, but it's a very scary thought, because even if it is a nuke, or even anything resembling a nuke, right? If it's a dirty bomb or anything with radioactivity, the cage, the fear curtain of death and doom will fall upon us so quickly, I can't even imagine what it's going to be like. It'll probably make COVID look like a joke, because of that will go off and they'll say everything changed and this could happen at any minute, and everybody has to follow all of these new protocols and procedures and give up all of these liberties and freedoms in the sake of nuclear safety, because you don't know who might be conspiring to do this, that, or the other. And so we've got to just monitor everything, and the stakes are so high, because if one goes off, it could kill 2 million people, 5 million people, 20 million people. And so everybody it's the same story again. Just give up your privacy, okay? Just open up. You just wait, click the button. Yes, accept. Just do it all. And well, we know how that goes. We know how this pattern continues. And when they get a little inch of power, they just gobble it all up, as we saw with Biden and the student loans, and what he's going to be continuing to do, I would imagine, as he continues sort of a lame duck presidency. You lose tools, you lose power, and so you have to then find different mechanisms to claw that power back. And if the midterms don't go their way, and I can't imagine they do, you start to see some panic, and you start to see some maybe some actions taken that you wouldn't already take, especially in an environment like this, where they are paranoid about Trump regaining control, and they are already breaking all sorts of norms any way you think about it. So we'll continue to cover that one. Now, speaking of Trump, we had his ruling yesterday from Judge Eileen Cannon, which was a bit of a surprise, to be honest. I was not really expecting that to happen. I was sort of thinking that Judge Cannon would be more inclined to support Raymond Dearie. In other words, she would have said, okay, that sounds reasonable, given him a lot of leverage to conduct the review of the documents in really whatever mechanism, whatever manner he wanted. But she didn't. She came back out and said, you are not allowed to require Trump to confirm or corroborate those documents, that property list, which I think is a really big win for Trump. I don't think he wanted to do that, because I honestly can't imagine that they know what's in those documents, or that their inventory is good. And so if they get out there and they start promising that they know this, or they declassified everything, it sort of exposes them to some potential criminal liability further down the road, which is why, yes, this is a civil case, this is a document review matter, it may never go to an indictment. I have a hard time believing that. And so, any claims that you make here that are on the record under oath, all of that, you just pick it right up and you just take it over in the criminal case. And it doesn't necessarily, get admitted as automatically as evidence and automatically get used against you. But prosecutors certainly will use it as such. They'll say, over here, you said this. Your story's changed over here. Why? Oh, interesting. Right? And then they get to impeach you, and they get to get all sorts of additional evidence in. So at this moment, that idea of your right to remain silent is a very powerful tool, because the government is using everything at their disposal to sort of pry open, if Trump is like a shell clamped closed, they're trying to crack that thing open. They're looking for, one opening, and if they can get it, they'll exploit it. So Trump has an interest in not opening up, and that's basically what every defense does ever. You defend yourself, because they will literally manipulate your words and the things that you say. They'll manipulate your defenses, into being evidence against you. Right? And everybody knew this even hundreds of years ago, which is why they wrote this into our Constitution. It's a very important thing. And, the government has tried to sort of undermine that need. Now, you don't need the right to remain silent. You can trust us. Or we don't manipulate anything. We have ethics now. We have oversight boards. We have uniforms that are really nice. And, we have TV commercials, and we go out there and we serve the community. Have coffee with a cop, or whatever. And like I said, I really respect a lot of cops, local cops. But there's been this propaganda campaign that law enforcement is on your side. Law enforcement cares about you, and prosecutors care about you, and the justice system cares about you. And I have a different interpretation of all of that. Right? Pretty strong disagreement with a lot of that. Because they're giant bureaucracies corrupted by power, politics, and money. And it's just getting worse, right? As the justice system continues to be more weaponized and more politicized, the new normal gets set at the top, at the DOJ, and then it trickles down, to other institutions across the country because everybody thinks that's perfectly acceptable. But Trump, he had some wins in Cannon's court, and she is getting scolded big time on this. She's getting blasted, many people saying she's Donald Trump's defense lawyer now. And, it's something that happens. Both sides do this. Anytime Trump gets a bad ruling, a lot of the people on the right will say that judge is biased. And oftentimes it's true. I take a look at DC, right? And as I expressed on the show yesterday, my extreme frustration with not even getting what I feel like are real trials out of DC. It's not even real. Bannon had basically no defenses. He was being prosecuted by a fake January 6th select committee that is I still have not seen a basis for their legitimacy other than the courts deferring over to the House. Okay, that's fine. But they're still not following their own rules. And so according to their standards, they're not even legally constituted. So how can they even fake it when their rules say this and they're doing something else? So, you take a look at all of this. What is going on? And, the prosecutors and the DOJ, there was that Houk case, Houck, I think first name Mark. I was waiting for more on this case before we took a look at it. We wanted to see, the indictment and some development on it. But, these are cases where this was a guy who got arrested under federal law after, it sounds like, county, city, county level charges were declined and state level charges were declined, but the feds picked it up. Why? Because this guy's on the right. He's an anti-abortion or pro-life person. There was an incident outside of a facility. The state authorities, the people who are, sort of closest to the local law, declined to charge him multiple times, and then the feds picked it up because it's about politics. It's not about really the law. In other words, at this local level, they investigated it. They said, we have no case. We've got no crime. We can't win here. There's no possibility of us prosecuting this, and so they dropped it. But the feds picked it up because it's a political cudgel. They want to be able to drag this side through the dirt. Hi, puppy. Good day. And so it's used as a tool. And as I think more of that happens, you start to see this normalized across the board. And I do think it works. Think about how many people have been turned off from representing Trump, right? We've seen many stories about this, and I think there's truth to this, that he has trouble finding counsel and representation. Big law firms don't want to work with him because the public, I would say a small sliver of the public is so TDS deranged that they, make it their point to attack those who would align themselves with Trump. And it seems to work. It's sort of like this chilling pressure campaign. And so you start to look at federal judges. I think they're pretty much immune from those pressures thanks to, their tenure and their positions. But it still is a very interesting thing to watch And, I don't know that it has any impact on Judge Cannon, whether it adjusts her, rulings moving forward, but there is a lot of pressure on her. I mean, a lot of people in the media are really dragging her through it today. And, the usual chorus, people like Weissman and everywhere else, the MSNBCers. I can't believe she's overriding Raymond Dearie. He's got more experience than her. She's 30-something years old. She just got appointed, and Trump appointed her. And, it's like a meltdown of epic proportions. But as to the argument, I think she's perfectly right. Okay, why should Trump have to do anything without having first reviewed the documents? You're asking him to attest to an unknown that he can't know, doesn't know, right? If somebody came out of your house and took a bunch of stuff and you said, hey, before we can talk about these pieces of property, you have to tell me what was in those boxes, and this is the only time for you to do it. And you say, okay, well, I can do that. Can I see what you took? Just so I can go through and make sure my memory core. No, you can't see any of it. Well, wait a minute. So you want me to have an inventory of every single thing that you took out of my property without knowing what you actually took out of my property? You want me to just sort of assemble it and then attest to it, and then I give up my rights to make any other challenges after the fact? And Raymond Dearie is saying, yes, that's what I'm saying. And Cannon says, no, that's ridiculous. And it's true, right? I think it is ridiculous, but I am a defense attorney. So that means we're always right. But, there are multiple ways to interpret this, no doubt. But I do think that this was a big win for Trump. And I think his defense team is probably doing cartwheels today. Now, I was also curious what the government's going to do about that. Because, one thing that we learned about yesterday was those 11,000 documents, it's turning into about 200,000 pages, which is obviously a big, big number. And, they have to hire people to go through all of that. And the conversation is now about how those documents being in this hiatus status are jeopardizing the government's, continued prosecution. And Dearie pushed a lot of this stuff, Cannon pushed a lot of these deadlines back to December. And so we're just going to see, more time. It's going to continue to drag out. The scope of this thing keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I think all of that is a disadvantage for the prosecutors. I mean, they really wanted this, I think, done, or at least impactful of the November elections. And they're getting stonewalled big time. Or they're getting speed bumps put in front of them big time. Special master got appointed, and then they sort of won some of that on appeal, but he's still there, still interfering with their work. I mean, they wanted this investigation at this point to be well underway. They wanted it. Because when did the raid happen? A long time ago. And ever since this special master got appointed, things have been basically at a standstill. And they've got a big election coming up. And if they lose either house, Biden's sort of a lame duck presidency. And if the Republicans gain control, you may see some actual investigations. We'll see. Not holding my breath on any of that, but we'll see. But we've got a lot to get to today. I think my internet problems are solved, and I'm 90% sure it was just the ISP, because when I was on the show, I tried a speed test sort of after the show crashed the first time, and my upload speeds were at 1.6 megabytes. 1.6. I'm embarrassed to even say that to you. I mean, I can't even imagine what you're thinking of me right now. 1.6 megabytes. And I'm thinking, well, there's the problem right there. It's not cables, it's not core, it's not technology, it's nothing. It's the friggin' ISP. And it was sort of sporadic like that throughout the rest of the night. I restarted everything, and I was speed testing like a mad fool all last night. And speeds were very good this morning. I was back up to 37 MBs up. And I pay for, like the ultra unlimited, don't bother me plan. Just give me that high volume gigabyte, baby. All of it, down as much as I can get. And so I was a little bit surprised about the issues yesterday. But my goodness, man, I know how frustrating it is for you. I hope you know how frustrating it is for me. I'm generally not a murderous person, generally. But when stuff goes off in the stream, it goes like 0 to 11 instantly. And I'm sure you can feel the veins bulging. But you know, when you like, I put a lot of effort into the show prep, and then you get into this flow, you get into this rhythm, and then everything just breaks. And you can just see it in the chat. Ah, loser, this sucks, you're terrible. It's like the worst. So I'm gonna try to make sure. I have another thing to check now before the show starts, which is just my internet speed. But I think it was just a little bit of a fluke type of a situation. There is a lot of, you know, as I walk around, there's construction all over the place, and we have people moving in. We just had 2 new people move into our building. And so I'm not sure if there's, you know, adjustments made or whatever, but I checked it again this morning. We're back up to 37. I even got up to 39 on one test. And that's respectable, okay? That I'm happy to share with you. It's, hey Rob, what's your MBs up? 39. Whoa, wow. That's really good for you. Congratulations. Yeah, thank you, I know. Hopefully it stays that way, but we'll see, my friends. Once again, I apologize for the frustrations because I know how irritating it is, especially when I start it back up and it still doesn't work. But hopefully it's fixed today, and we're gonna, you know, pray to those little internet goblins in those tubes out there. You know, come on guys, thank you for clearing those out for us today. But my friends, those are the headlines on the day, and it is Friday. And as I said to our friends in Florida, I hope that everybody out there is doing okay and recovering. You know, it's gonna be a long week, and honestly, probably a long week ahead. So hopefully you're doing okay out there. And for those of you not in the hurricane zone, hopefully you are getting outside and getting some fresh air, getting some sunshine, because it's beautiful in many parts of the country, and it is important that we get some of that vitamin D, get some of that sunshine, get some of that fresh air, so that we can stay optimized, highly efficient human creatures. But we've got a lot to get into today. We're getting started a little bit earlier. It's Friday. Love the Fridays, big project days, and we get to move the ball forward on some good stuff. So I'm meeting with my team today, and then we have, what do I have? Oh, I've got 2 meetings. Yeah, I've got a meeting with my coach, who's gonna, you know, probably give me an earful, which I deserve. And then we're meeting with the team. We've got to get our Q4 planning and then our 2023 planning scheduled. Q4, we're pretty much set in stone, but 2023, of course, is right around the corner. We've got some pretty big plans in place to help more people, to be of service, however we can do that. So full day ahead, and then it's show prep time, and then we'll be back in here to get into it and more. I hope you are having a great end of your week. Maybe you're done already. Maybe you're already, you know, feet up on the, what do they call it? What do they call the things you put your feet on? At the end of a couch. I don't know. Somebody will tell me in the comments. Thank you for it. You can tell I don't do that. I just put them right on the coffee table. But some people have, I think, furniture for the feet. I'm not that sophisticated. But I hope you're having an amazing day, my friends, and I look forward to seeing you later. Bye-bye.